so you were diagnosed in your first mammogram, um, you know, your first one ever, correct?
Whenever, yep.
Oh, that's a fun surprise. Um, were you expecting that when you went in there? Did you sort of have that sixth sense of, I just have this bad feeling about this, or what was that like when you found out?
It was a total surprise. And I was told that I had dense breast tissue, so to expect to come back. So when they called me to come back, I was like, okay. And I tried, of course, to squeeze it in between, like, dropping my son off and, like, picking him up at a class that he took. And so here I am at the hospital, and they're like, oh, well, now we have to do more testing. And I'm like, I gotta go, you know. And they're like, oh, well, you can't leave. I was like, but I have to. So then, of course, he came back and said, you know, we do think it is something, but we'll call you to confirm. And so those were like the longest 2 days of my whole life, was just waiting.
Oh.
And, you know, my husband, of course, was like freaking out, and it was his Christmas party, and, you know, it was just a whirlwind. And then over the next like 3 weeks, it was just like trying to get in to see this doctor and that doctor. And the first doctor I went to said, oh, we'll just do a simple lumpectomy, and then you'll do some radiation and you'll be fine. But something was like, I don't necessarily, not that I didn't trust her, she's a fine doctor, but I just was like, I think we need just a second opinion. So we ended up going to Sloan Kettering, and they did some more of their own tests after reviewing those tests, and they found that it was just throughout my whole entire left breast. It wasn't just that lump. And that I had a lump on my right side, which wasn't cancerous yet, but that sort of pushed me to say, you know what, then just do a double mastectomy and sort of get it out of my body. So yeah, so then of course waiting for that. So I had the mastectomy. I just finished my 8 rounds of chemo in June, and I'm going actually for my reconstruction surgery this Friday. And then,
wow.
Yeah, and then I'll start radiation at the end of August. So I'm sort of in the middle of it all and trying, you know, and I have 2 small kids and just trying to, I don't know, be normal, whatever that is.
So, what was it like when obviously you've told your children, because, you know, now you have to kind of explain why mommy looks different, why mommy doesn't feel good, you know, how was that difficult? What?
I had a lot of people telling me, don't tell them everything. Keep it from them and just tell them what you need to. And I don't know, it was right before Christmas. I was crying, you know, both of the grandmas were here, and, you know, they're trying not to freak out. And I was like, I can't hide from them when you go and have, you know, all those, of course I have chemo brain, so I can't remember, but when they do, like, the core biopsies, and, you know, I'm coming home with, like, ice packs and uncomfortable, and you can't, like, hug me. And I was like, I have to tell them. At the time they were 6 and 4, and now they're 7 and 5. But I was like, you know, I had to explain it in terms that they would understand. My daughter is very intuitive, and my son is a mama's boy. So it was very just like, let's talk about it. And then I had a complication after my mastectomy. I had gone to the bathroom and somehow, I don't know, through stroke of luck, bursted like a vein, and so I started to bleed internally. And we live in a rural area, so of course, you know, my husband's freaking out. He's on the phone with 911. It takes forever for the ambulance to come, and then the ambulance took me away, and my daughter was, of course, bawling because she's like, I have no idea what's going on. And so I felt just being most honest with them was the best thing. And, you know, of course, they have days where they act out and they don't know why they're upset, but it's because, you know, I can't do what I used to do. And I just feel like this last, like, 8 months has just been a lot of hang out with someone else while I get better, but they've been very good about it.
How old are they?
They're 7 and 5.
Oh, wow, yeah. And your daughter's older?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, and she's right, yeah, so she's at that age where she's really starting to figure stuff out, so that's got to be really difficult.
And it's, you know, when she brings the drawing home from school with I hate cancer and, you know, with the ambulance, and you're just like, wow, you know. Yeah. Are you okay? You know, that's why you're just like, you're going to be fine. And
yeah.
I'm trying to reassure her because breast cancer did run in my family. I don't have the BRCA gene. You know, my mom and my sister are fine, but it was my grandmother and my great-great-grandmother. But they both passed away in their 50s. But like, that medicine is much different now. And I think it's just, I don't know, I tell my daughter it's, you know, an illness, and it's going and we're getting treatment and I'll be fine. And some days I believe that more than others.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the other question is it must be very difficult because, for someone like myself who I don't have any children and most of my friends also are just starting to have kids or don't have children yet. So it was sort of like I could just really focus on myself and a lot of my support system was just really focused around me because it was, I'm the young friend who's got cancer and nobody really knows what to do with it, so there's just a lot of love and support. But it must be a lot harder when you really need to focus on taking care of yourself, but you also have two very small children who can't take care of themselves. Has that been something that's been a real struggle for you, or how do you find the balance in that?
It has. I've been very, very fortunate that both my mother and my mother-in-law are retired. So they have both sort of been taking turns, if you will, coming to stay with us because they live out of town. So we've been very fortunate most of the last 8 months to have somebody else here to sort of help alleviate that. But like the last 3 weeks, I've been by myself with my kids, and it's summer, and we've got swimming lessons and schedules, and sometimes, my husband's like, make sure you remember just to rest. Like, that's your number one focus is to rest and then with the kids. And they've been good. And so sometimes, like, when I'm in a really, like, upbeat mood and I feel like playing, I'm like, okay, let's get off the couch, let's go do something. And they're like, what are you doing? But I think it's, a fine balance. And they've been, I can't even express, they've been very good. And I have a very close group of friends that have been very, very supportive about, like, hey, let me take your kids, let me bring them to the beach, let me do this with them. So I've been very fortunate that way. But there was, like, that, I was afraid to tell people because I do live in a small community, and I didn't want those people to be like, oh, what can I do for you? A lot of that, can I help you, when they wouldn't talk to me normally or help me otherwise. And,
right.
I tried to take what help was being offered, but also realize that I had to be true to myself and, not just take help that I wouldn't necessarily normally take otherwise.
How did you feel chemo went for you? How did you fare during, what kind of chemo did you have? You did
I had AC for 4 weeks, and that was the hardest part for me. Although I don't understand. I just finished Taxol a month ago, and now I'm getting, like, the neuropathy with my hands and my feet. And, like, I feel like an 80-year-old woman sometimes when I get off the couch after the end of a long day. I'm like, oh, my goodness, like, is this getting worse before it gets better? And, so you Google it, and then, of course, it's like you read too much information, and you're like, I don't necessarily, maybe no information is better information, and just to listen to your body. But that's why I wanted to participate in this, is to talk to other women who've been through it and who are, like, a couple years out from treatment and see, because that's my biggest fear is, like, when treatment's over, how do you know? Yes, I had the double mastectomy, but how do I know I'm cancer-free? My doctor says we're not going to PET scan you or whatever because it's just dust that we're taking care of. And I'm thinking, well, holy crap.
No, I have the same, my doctor doesn't PET scan me, and it was, you're stage 1, and we did all these things, and there's no reason to do that, and it's sort of the you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because you're like, well, if you think that I'm fine, then I don't really need to go under the pressure of worrying about it. But then you're kind of like, but what if there is something that's going on in there and you're not checking it, and now I don't know about it? And it's, I mean, I always say this to people, that there's so much that no one really prepares you for, because when you're in the middle of treatment, you're just sort of nose to the ground, like, especially if you have a family or a, in my case, I had a job. Like, there are all these things that you just kind of go through the motions, and everything happens very, very quickly when you get diagnosed, right? It's sort of like, okay, you're diagnosed, and now, I think more often than not, you hear that chemo is becoming, I feel like, and you guys can let me know how you feel, I feel like more than often than not, I hear people are getting chemo. And maybe it's that you're hearing more triple negative and you're hearing more HER2 positive, or maybe people are just being more aggressive with the treatments to kind of help for future cure or prevention or whatever. But, you kind of are like thrust into this, okay, well, now it's time for chemo, and then you get so consumed with, well, what's chemo going to be like? Because in your head, all you think of is, being sick and being in this terrible lonely chair, and it's awful, and just, you know, I can only comment on my particular situation with chemo, but I actually quite enjoyed when I went to chemo, believe it or not. My friends came with me, my mom came with me, we got lunch. I was away from work, even though I worked the whole time. It was sort of nice to walk away from my cubicle. And when you're getting chemo, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't make, it's the after effects that then you kind of feel crappy, but um I got myself all worked up for what that was going to be like. And then it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. And then the mastectomy, because I had a double mastectomy last September, um, again, got myself all worked up about how bad it was going to be and how much pain I was going to be in. And again, maybe because I'm younger and we're all younger, our bodies can kind of maybe handle things differently. But I would say that after everything has been done, and it was sort of like, it's the now what, how do I live with, like, oh, like, just for as an example, the last probably 2 weeks I've had not pain, but kind of a discomfort in, my rib cage below where my, implant is sitting. And, you spend a week thinking, oh my God, what is that? What is that? Could that be something that I should be concerned about? Should I call my doctor? Oh my God, your mind can just take you a million different places. And as women who have, had to advocate for ourselves, you're also fearful to say, I don't want to just call my doctor and say, I'm feeling something funny, and they tell me I'm fine, because you kind of really have to listen to your own intuition. I kind of went on a tangent here, but it is really, really difficult after you're done with the chemo, after the surgery, and you're kind of just, you're now just a survivor. And I say that like it's a joke, but it's not. Like, and people kind of move along, right? So especially like when your hair starts to grow back and people don't necessarily know that something might be wrong with you, and your breasts look normal in clothes, and you start to feel better. People move forward. They have to move on to whoever else is kind of in crisis or whatever the next thing is, and you're kind of left with your own thoughts of how to deal with this. So to your point, yeah, I do think that, and there aren't a lot of younger women social groups to be able to talk about it. And I think that more often now than ever, we really need something like this to be able to, and the internet is the worst thing in the whole wide world. I mean, people I find with blogs more often than not love to write about terrible things that have happened to them. I almost wonder if it's that those people don't have a lot of support, or they're looking for it in the wrong places, so they just kind of put it out there. And then there's people like maybe us who go on trying to just get some information and stumble upon something that makes you feel even more insecure or worried about what you were thinking, when, a lot of the people who have these great success stories aren't online blogging about it because they've moved forward with their lives. And there are so many great success stories, but I think it's important to surround yourself with positive people who are going to tell you, don't think like that. That's just you being in your head about it. And, you need people to give you that kind of affirmation for that.